Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very, very well, having a good Tuesday as always, especially after last night's edition of Monday Night Raw. There is a ton of news stories to get into today, so let's get straight into today's stories and let's start off talking about a WWE Championship match that has been set for next week's edition of Monday Night Raw, because obviously coming out of Elimination Chamber, there was a lot of discussion as to what was going to be next for the new WWE Champion, The Miz. Was he going to be this transitional champion? Was he going to drop the WWE Championship only 24 hours later on Monday Night Raw? Well, now we have our answer, because new WWE Champion The Miz is scheduled to make his first WWE Championship defense next Monday night on Raw. WWE has confirmed that Bobby Lashley versus The Miz for the WWE Championship will take place on next week's episode. Last night's edition of Raw saw Lashley and MVP confront The Miz and issue him an ultimatum for a title shot as payback for helping The Miz cash in his Money in the Bank title shot on a weakened Drew McIntyre at the Elimination Chamber event on Sunday. Now, The Miz did not refuse a title shot, but told Lashley he needed more time. This led to Braun Strowman interrupting and demanding a championship opportunity for himself. This led to a segment with The Miz, John Morrison, Lashley, Strowman, Adam Pearce, and Shane McMahon. Shane McMahon then made Strowman versus Lashley as the main event of last night's edition of Raw. If Strowman had won the match, he would join Lashley and The Miz next Monday night to make a WWE Championship triple threat match. The main event took place and ended with Lashley pinning Strowman after a spear and a spine buster. WWE then confirmed Lashley versus The Miz for next Monday night on the USA Network. Now, of course, there's no word yet on what WWE has planned for Lashley versus The Miz next week. If we hear anything, of course, we'll discuss it at length here on the channel. It was, of course, they reported yesterday via WrestleVotes on Twitter that The Miz is currently not scheduled for the WWE Championship match at WrestleMania 37, whereas Bobby Lashley is. If that plan sticks, there's no word yet as to how WWE is going to get there, but it has led some to believe that next week we could be seeing that man right there, Bobby Lashley, win the WWE Championship. Now, it was interesting, like I said, going into this, I think everyone thought, going into last night's edition of Raw, I certainly did, we did a preview talking about it as well, it was kind of the feeling that either we were going to see a new WWE Champion last night, or we were going to see something that would help facilitate that championship changing hands. Because as I mentioned, I know Miz might not call himself a transitional champion. He may not want to refer to himself as a transitional champion. He's not going to be WWE Champion for a long time. Before even the report came out, I think most people thought, okay, The Miz is the WWE Champion, but there still is a lot of time between now and WrestleMania in terms of the WWE landscape. We've still got Fastlane and we've still got several episodes of Monday Night Raw. So it was always the opinion, certainly of myself and I think a lot of fans, that whilst this Miz WWE Championship reign wasn't going to be a long one, it was going to certainly be a very enjoyable one, even if it was for 24 hours. The reaction that it's generated on social media, the polarizing reaction it's generated on social media, goes to show that WWE did the right thing, in my opinion. And look, I always felt that The Miz was going to be facing Bad Bunny at WrestleMania anyway. They had the segment earlier on in Elimination Chamber where Bad Bunny, the 24/7 champion, the rap star, the guy that was on SNL as a music guest this week, slapped The Miz. And WWE are obviously moving forward with that angle. I still think it's going to be The Miz and John Morrison versus Bad Bunny and Damian Priest at WrestleMania. And I don't think those plans have changed. When it comes to Lashley, I really do think Lashley's going to win the WWE Championship next week. And if it's not next week, it'll be at Fastlane. Obviously, there is a potential that maybe Braun Strowman could get involved next week. Maybe Drew McIntyre gets involved next week. Who knows? But I think Lashley, either next week or at Fastlane, is going to be the WWE Champion for the first time in his career. And it's about time, frankly. I mentioned this before. Lashley's 44 years of age. It really is now or never. It really is now or never. You can't wait a couple more years until he's into his late 40s. I mean, a guy in his mid-40s anyway is a push, but I mean, look at him. He doesn't look like... Bobby Lashley never ages. And at this point, he really is doing the best work of his career. He looks the best that he's probably ever looked in his career. In ring, he's the best he's ever been in his career. Even on the mic, which is still probably an area for improvement, he's improved there, and he's got MVP as the mouthpiece. It's like Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar, he's not the best promo in the world, unless he's actually being Brock Lesnar in the UFC, then he actually is a very good promo. But in the scripted reality of WWE, he's not the best promo, and Bobby Lashley is the same. How do you overcome that with Brock Lesnar? You throw in Paul Heyman as one of the best promos of all time. Bobby Lashley, you throw in MVP, who was also a very, very good promo. So Lashley at this point really is the complete package, and as I mentioned, it really is now or never. And what I will say, and this has kind of been the general feeling on social media as well, is that it's so refreshing to see not only different people be involved in the WWE Championship picture as we're heading to WrestleMania, but also it's so refreshing to see people that are going to be there after WrestleMania. So often over the last 10 years, frankly, for such a long period of time, we have seen the main event scene and the WWE Championship picture or the World Championship picture when it comes to WrestleMania season be dominated by part-time superstars that just aren't going to be there after WrestleMania. And I think initially it was great, it made WrestleMania feel like a big event, but it's got to the point now where it's actually damaged the product slightly because these people are around for WrestleMania season and then they're gone, and it makes WWE year-round not feel as important, not as must-see. Back in the Attitude Era, and I know people are going to say, oh, stop talking about the Attitude Era, but it's the same with the Ruthless Aggression Era. Back during that period of time, the people that were in the main events of WrestleMania or the featured matches of WrestleMania, they were guaranteed to be there on the following edition of Raw, SmackDown, and the Raw and SmackDowns after that, and after that, and after that. They were going to be there year-round. That's how you create stars. And I know people will say, well, you're going to create a new star in the 44-year-old Bobby Lashley. Well, it's different, and Lashley has been there all year. He is going to be there all next year. The same with Drew McIntyre. The same even if The Miz is going to be in the WrestleMania WWE Championship picture, which I don't think he will. That's refreshing. And at least WWE are realizing now, look, we can't keep putting the same old part-time superstars in those WWE Championship pictures. We just can't, because it might have been sustainable for 10 years or so, but it's not sustainable anymore because those part-time wrestlers, they're aging out and there are no new part-time wrestlers to put in there because you haven't created those legendary stars over the next few years. So I think it's absolutely the right call, and I hope we see that picture next week. I really do. Whether or not we will see a title change next week, like I said, it might not happen next week, but I think it's happening soon, and that's great to see. I think I mentioned before, I don't like to use the whole, oh, they deserve it, they deserve this, all this kind of stuff, but if anyone deserved another shot at the WWE Championship for all of the work he's put in, it's The Miz. And if anyone deserves, because of his career of work, because of just everything that he has going for him, deserves to be WWE Champion at least once in his career, it's Bobby Lashley. And I think it's coming at the exact right time of the year. He's been so well booked over the course of the last 6 months as US champion and this CEO of the Hurt Business, all this kind of stuff. He's really being booked like Brock Lesnar in that he's dominating, people are struggling to get offense in, and he's been booked. I mean, we criticize WWE for so many reasons, but one thing you do have to praise them for, when they do good things, you have to praise them. I think you have to praise him for is the booking of Bobby Lashley. It really has been sensational. So certainly going to get people excited and talking about Raw next week and possibly a WWE Championship change on the road to WrestleMania, which is certainly very exciting. Let's continue talking about last night's events on Monday Night Raw, because WWE has seemingly ended the Ric Flair, Lacey Evans, Charlotte Flair storyline last night. It seems like WWE put an end to the storyline involving Ric Flair, Lacey Evans, and Charlotte Flair on this week's episode of Monday Night Raw. During an intense backstage confrontation, Charlotte told her father to, quote, go home and no longer steal the spotlight from her. Furthermore, Flair confirmed that he is not the one who impregnated Evans and was just trying to expand the brand by mentoring Evans, who he put over as a great talent. Now, although it was earlier insinuated in storyline that Flair could be the father of Evans' unborn child, it was reported last week that Evans is legitimately pregnant and therefore was pulled, of course, from the Raw Women's Championship match against Asuka Elimination Chamber on Sunday, but they just didn't mention it at all during the pay-per-view. They just hoped that people forgot. Now, with Evans and Flair possibly written off TV, it seems like Charlotte Flair will now probably begin a feud with the Raw Women's Champion Asuka, her former tag team partner, current tag team partner still, I guess. WWE teased some tension between Flair and Asuka after they lost to Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax on Monday. Now, I think that was always inevitable. I mentioned before, the moment that Charlotte came back and won the tag team championships with Asuka, it meant that we were probably going to get Asuka versus Charlotte Flair once again at WrestleMania. I think we're probably not going to get a singles match. We've seen that RHEA Ripley is coming to Monday Night Raw. We'll touch on that story in a second. I think we could possibly see a triple threat match at WrestleMania for the Raw Women's Championship. Charlotte Flair versus Asuka versus Ripley. Why can't it be Asuka versus RHEA Ripley? Because it's Charlotte Flair, and every WrestleMania season she has to be involved in some championship picture. That's not my rules, that's the rules of WWE. Go back and look. Every single year she's involved in it. To the point where last year they added the NXT Women's Championship to the show because they wanted Charlotte Flair to go after a championship. That's how highly they regard her. She is a phenomenal talent. She is shoehorned into positions and storylines sometimes, but that's WWE's opinion of her. When it comes to dropping this storyline, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I was very concerned for a period of time that they being WWE, were going to go full-blown soap opera with this, and they were going to have Ric Flair and Lacey Evans get married, do an Al Wilson, Dawn Marie rehash, and say that Ric Flair had impregnated Lacey Evans and all this kind of stuff. And thankfully, sanity has reared its head here, and they've just said, you know what? It's just not worth it. And there was a concern of mine, and I saw this on social media as well on Elimination Chamber on Sunday, and it's a really good point, that the main two storylines, or some of the main storylines in WWE right now when it comes to the women's division, are centered around men. When it's on SmackDown, Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks, that's got Reginald. Reginald's the focal point in that, a man. When it comes to the Raw side of things, Charlotte Flair or Asuka and Lacey Evans, who's a focal point in that? It's Ric Flair. And it kind of goes back to, I don't want to be one of those people that suddenly goes, man in a woman's environment, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't seem particularly right there. Surely you should be showcasing the female talent and selling the female talent for their ability in the ring as characters and as promos, all that kind of stuff. Not focusing on Ric Flair and Reginald. That's a concern for me. So I'm glad that sanity has reared its head there, and they're just moving on and focusing on possibly Asuka versus Charlotte Flair, possibly versus Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania. To me, that's the right decision, and that's the road that they're going in. So I'm not complaining in the slightest that they've dropped this Ric Flair Lacey Evans storyline. If anything, it's a very good idea that they've done that. Now, speaking of Raw, also last night, as you can see there, I have not photoshopped that. That was a real thing last night on Monday Night Raw because Randy Orton threw up some black liquid on WWE Monday Night Raw last night. Now, in a bizarre turn of events on last night's edition of Raw, Randy Orton coughed up some black liquid while cutting a promo on The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, and Alexa Bliss. Now, during the segment, Orton said that he was unable to focus on his pursuit of the WWE Championship since he was distracted by Bliss last week. After a replay of Bliss's controversial Pentagon promo that was from last week on Monday Night Raw. I don't get why it was controversial. I know people are saying, satanic and dark and all that kind of stuff. It's TV and it's PG. So, WWE have done far more controversial stuff legitimately. Look at independent contractors and some of the episodes of Dark Side of the Ring. I don't think them doing an angle on Raw where Alexa Bliss is in a Pentagon is actually that controversial at all. Nevertheless, after the replay of that promo last week was shown, Orton started to have trouble with his throat before he threw up some black liquid. Orton then struggled to stay on his feet as the segment ended. Now, Bliss took to Twitter to react to the segment, and she wrote, quote, "You okay, Randy, ... Now, as noted, WWE still does have plans to do Orton versus The Fiend at WrestleMania 37. The Fiend, of course, has not been on WWE television since he was burned to a crisp by Randy Orton at last year's TLC pay-per-view in the Firefly Inferno match. Now, obviously, we know that The Fiend is coming back. I made a post on this on social media, and I think it's good to mention. I thought Randy Orton's booking at Elimination Chamber was terrible, and I think Randy Orton did, because he liked a ton of tweets that said the same, because it just seems so random. He was the first person eliminated. He was eliminated by Kofi Kingston, but he was just there for being there. It didn't further any storyline. We didn't have Alexa Bliss distract him. It just felt very odd, and Randy Orton's going to be in a marquee match at WrestleMania. He's going to be in a big-time match against The Fiend. It might be cinematic. I'm sure it'll be a big gimmick match. Whatever it is, it's a big featured match at WrestleMania, and Randy Orton's getting eliminated first. Randy Orton's done tremendous work over the course of the last 12 months, but for the last 6 months or so, all Randy Orton's done is lose. Lose to Drew McIntyre time and time again. I know he won the WWE Championship in there for a hot second, but he lost in the end. Losing at Elimination Chamber, losing to Edge. The guy just never stops losing. I know he beat The Fiend, but, it doesn't seem... not that his credibility could ever go because he's Randy Orton, but he's not being booked in the best way possible, and I don't think Randy Orton was happy about that. Regarding last night, look, I know some people are going to hate it because some people hate the whole supernatural stuff that The Fiend does and the whole supernatural element of Randy Orton, The Fiend, and Alexa Bliss, this storyline. I've been on board with it. If anything, I think it's been some of the best stuff on Monday Night Raw. Not that that's a high bar, because a lot of that show is genuinely unwatchable and boring at times, but I've been on board with it. I think Alexa Bliss has absolutely knocked it out of the park. Whenever The Fiend and Bray Wyatt is on Monday Night Raw, it's always just a pleasure to watch because it's so different and unique, and I think Randy Orton has held up his end of the bargain, and doing fantastic promos and off the cuff and different stuff. The mask, the burns, all that. I thought it was great. I've enjoyed every second of it. And I'm one that, I don't mind the supernatural element of it. At the end of the day, it's a TV show, it's entertainment. Maybe more of the purists, people that like to focus on it as a sport, don't like it. But then again, they're the same people that like doing loads of dives, when if this was a real, actual, athletic combat sport, you don't see people in the UFC diving off of cages. So you have to open your mind up to different things. And I think the supernatural element of it is fine. What I will say is, though, that they're walking a very fine line, I think, that, and I mentioned this on social media as well, that the stuff they've done so far is fine, I think, but this was very reminiscent of Papa Shango and Ultimate Warrior back in the day, of throwing up this sort of weird liquid and all this kind of stuff. And there is a very fine line with all this sort of stuff of being dark and odd and different, and then going too far and it just being silly, goofy, over the top. And I felt like this week they were very, very close to that. And maybe they didn't step over that line, but they've been very close there. And I don't know if we necessarily need that. But like I've said time and time again with this storyline when it comes to The Fiend, Alexa Bliss and Randy Orton, whenever The Fiend does return, and that could be at Fastlane, that could be at WrestleMania. We could see an Undertaker where The Fiend just doesn't show up until WrestleMania. Regardless, whenever The Fiend does return, it's going to be a moment. They've put their time into it. They're taking their time with it, WWE. They're not rushing it. And I think you have to credit them for that. It's going to be a big moment. So whilst I wasn't totally sold on that segment last night, again, it's maybe just, again, it's very fine lines without going too far in terms of just being silly. I think they've done a fantastic job. So I'm excited to see where that goes next. I mentioned earlier about Rhea Ripley. We finally know where Rhea Ripley is heading next, because she is headed to the Monday Night Raw brand. There had been speculation that Rhea Ripley could be possibly going to Raw or SmackDown after her official call-up from NXT was to be considered at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view in late January. But now WWE has confirmed that the former NXT Women's Champion is indeed headed to Monday nights. As seen this week on Raw, a coming soon vignette for Rhea Ripley aired during last night's post-Elimination Chamber edition of Monday Night Raw. Ripley was the number 14th entrant in the 30-woman Royal Rumble match last month. She was the last elimination thrown out by winner Bianca Belair. She lasted 39 minutes and 6 seconds and eliminated the likes of Toni Storm, Santana Garrett, Dana Brooke, Dakota Kai, Mandy Rose, Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair, of course with Belair's help. Rhea Ripley's last TV match came on the January 6th episode of New Year's Evil for NXT, where she lost to Raquel Gonzalez in the last women's standing match. Now, there's no word yet on when Rhea Ripley will make her official Raw debut, but of course, when she does, we'll obviously talk about that as well. So there's certainly, I'm very excited for this. I think it's the right call. There was certainly a lot of discussion about where Rhea Ripley would head up next. Would she go to Raw or SmackDown, which was the better brand for her to go to? I think looking at the lay of the land right now, Raw is definitely the better brand for her. She's more needed there. Not that there isn't talent on Monday Night Raw, there is, but it goes back to sometimes my criticism of AEW and there's women's division. I just don't know if the booking of the Raw female talent's been really up to snuff recently. But putting someone like Rhea Ripley on the brand kind of forces the hands, you would hope, of the writers. There is a concern as to, do the WWE writing team get Rhea Ripley, considering, in past experiences, they haven't got NXT talent that's been unique and some of the booking hasn't been the best, but I have a lot of faith. I think they know what they've got in Rhea Ripley, and as I mentioned earlier, I think it's highly likely we could see a situation where it's Asuka versus Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania for the Raw Women's Championship, so it'll be interesting to see when she debuts. I would probably, if I had to guess, probably say it was probably going to be sometime maybe like Fastlane. I don't see her on Raw in the coming weeks, but I would think Fastlane's a good option for that. So certainly we could see Rhea Ripley maybe make her debut on Fastlane or possibly the Raw after Fastlane. That's an option too. Speaking of AEW though, it's been announced that Anna Jay is currently out of action with a shoulder injury. AEW has announced that Anna Jay suffered a shoulder injury and will be out of action for 6 to 12 months. It was noted that Jay suffered the injury while training. She will need to undergo surgery to repair the injury. This is what AEW announced, quote, Anna Jay was injured training and can't compete tonight. Anna requires shoulder surgery and is expected to miss 6 to 12 months. She's replaced in the Women's Eliminator Tournament by alternate Maddie Renkowski, a student and protege of Thunder Rosa. Jay was, of course, scheduled to face Dr. Britt Baker during last night's episode of the AEW Women's World Title Eliminator Tournament on YouTube. She has been replaced by, as I mentioned, Maddie Rankowski, who was an alternate for the tournament. Last night's show also featured Nyla Rose versus Tay Conti in the first round on the United States side of the tournament, plus 2 matches in the semi-finals of the Japanese side of the tournament. Yuka Sakazaki versus Emi Sakura and Ryo Mizunami versus Aja Kong. There had been some speculation on Jay's status and if she missed last week's tapings after AEW pulled her from the tournament, advertising this afternoon. She also did not appear on Being the Elite this week. Now AEW has confirmed the injury and surgery. Jay has not wrestled since defeating Alex Garcia on AEW Dark in mid-January, but she had been seen at ringside for some of Tay Conti's matches as of late. Now Jay tweeted on the injury yesterday and wrote, quote, "I'm super upset about this. All I can do now is put in the work to come back stronger. Thanks for all the love and support, everyone. It means a lot to me." So obviously, awful injury, and it obviously sucks, and 6 to 12 months is a long period of time, and Anna Jay was really building up a lot of momentum and obviously has a ton of potential as a talent, so really frustrating and disappointing for her, but there's no doubt she'll be back and stronger than ever, and AEW will certainly take care of her throughout the entirety of this process. And finally, we have an update on the in-ring status and future of WWE star Samoa Joe. Now, Samoa Joe recently spoke with Rick Ucchino of Sportskeeda, great guy by the way, be sure to follow him on Twitter, and would not commit to a time frame for his return to the WWE ring. Now, while Samoa Joe didn't give a timetable for his return to in-ring action, he did make it clear that he's not done with pro wrestling. The Samoa Submission Machine noted that WWE Medical is taking their time with his well-being and making sure he's as healthy as he can be. He said, quote, "As far as a timetable, no, but I just want to reassure people that you know this point, WWE Medical is doing the best for my health and my well-being, and I'm appreciative of it, so we're taking our time. We're making sure that I'm as healthy as I can be, and we are, yeah, I think that's essentially it, you know, I'm not putting a timetable on it, because it's the type of injury that is not something that I want to rush, obviously, for obvious reasons, so yeah, I mean, that's essentially the update." Joe noted that there have been some COVID-19 pandemic related technology holdups with his recovery. He also said his in-ring career is not over by a long shot and he's appreciative of the recovery time. He said, quote, "I mean, and obviously too, there's been some holdups from a technical standpoint with the pandemic going on and availability of medical personnel, but for the most part, we're taking a careful, measured approach, and though I don't think my in-ring career is over by a long shot, I'm appreciative of the recovery time and that my health is being respected at a premium." Now, of course, Samoa Joe continues to do Raw commentary every Monday night. He last wrestled on TV during the February 10, 2020 Raw, where he teamed with Kevin Owens and the Viking Raiders for a loss to Seth Rollins, AOP, and Murphy. Joe spent several months on the shelf in late 2019 due to a broken thumb, returning to the ring in late December of that year. He then suffered a concussion while doing a dive on the January 27, 2020 Raw episode and returned to action the following week, and then suffered a second concussion at a Raw commercial shoot in February of last year. Joe then tested positive to violate the WWE wellness policy and was suspended for 30 days. WWE brought him back to the announce table in late April of last year. So that's really the update when it comes to Samoa Joe. I know that isn't much of an update, but it's also good to see that Samoa Joe believes that he's not done in ring. It would be a crying shame to see that he doesn't get a big retirement match or doesn't get one last run in the ring. I still think we'll see Samoa Joe get one more in-ring run in WWE. They've just got a process of taking a lot of time when it comes to concussions. Alexa Bliss was exactly the same. That was in 2019 and late 2018. She'd had a couple concussions really close to each other. She's resting all the time now, but she was out of action for, I mean, wasn't it like 9 months, maybe even longer than that? They take their time with it, but I think I'll be the same with Samoa Joe. So hopefully we'll see him back soon, but he also does a great job on commentary, so it's kind of, you know, he does great out of the ring and does great in the ring too. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved with the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.